when I first met you, I know that you always had a lot to say. When was the first time you felt that you really became an entrepreneur?
You know, you and I had this conversation, and I have to say, looking back at now that I'm older, it was when I was 11 years old. My first job was the paper route. I was a paper boy for the San Diego Union-Tribune. So that job taught me entrepreneurship. It taught me responsibility because I had to wake up very early in the morning, which I still do to this day, because I knew that the paper was going to arrive at my house. I knew that I had to package the newspaper. And in addition to that, I had to pay attention to the spreadsheet that came along with the newspaper to find out how many new subscribers I was going to deliver the newspaper to and how many people deleted or canceled the subscription that I was not going to deliver the newspaper to. So at the age of 11, I was already multitasking. I was not only just putting together the newspaper, but I had to figure out during that route which new residents I was going to deliver to and which residents I wasn't going to deliver to anymore. In addition to that, we got bonuses for subscribing new people to the newspaper. And I would go door knocking, asking people if they wanted to get a subscription to the newspaper, because I was their local paper boy. So in a way, I was marketing myself so that my paper route would grow. And it eventually did. It grew to the point where I was already kind of like hiring other little paper boys to help me deliver newspapers through my route. So that job really taught me a lot of responsibility. In addition to that, everything that they give you, like the rubber bands for the newspaper, the canvas bag to put on your bike, all that they charge you. So there's a cost associated with doing business. So early in my life, I learned that it takes money to make money. That concept is true. The person that created the saying wasn't lying. It takes money to make money. So that was an interesting time for me. Like I said, I grew the paper route. I expanded it. And back then, there was an evening edition also of the newspaper. So it allowed me to not only deliver it in the morning, but also deliver it in the afternoon after school. So that was, that I'd have to say was when entrepreneurship for me kicked in at a very young age.
At the age of 11?
Age of 11.
Wow. You said that it takes money to earn money, right?
Yeah.
What time and what place during that job did you realize that? Was it before you started hiring people? Was that after or when you first got started? Where did that idea come to mind while you were doing this paper route job? Because this was your first job, right?
Yeah, it was my first job. So the idea came to me when I started seeing that the newspaper company was deducting from your check. A little check I was getting, they would deduct for the rubber bands, they would deduct for the bags. So if it rained, you had to put the newspaper in a bag. If I needed another canvas bag, that was a deduction. So there was cost associated with doing business. So I knew that I had to take care of the things that I had. If not, that's a deduction that gets taken away from your check. And then obviously, if I'm hiring other people to assist me, I have to give them something, whether it's, at the time you're 11 years old. So kids really don't want money. They want probably, at the time it was, let's go to 7-Eleven and buy a Big Gulp or a Slurpee. Or a copy of Thrasher magazine, because we were skateboarders back then. So, those were the things that were of value to an 11-year-old. It was either, going to 7-Eleven or, giving them baseball card money. So regardless of the value, how small the value was, I knew that there was a cost associated with the transaction. So I learned that very quickly when I was young. I knew that it takes money to make money.
So starting as an 11-year-old doing the paper route, when did you start thinking that you could make this thing bigger? When did you think you could start making this paper route job grow?
Well, I knew that there was other paper boys in the area. So I was the paper boy for a specific area, but I was ambitious enough to tell the supervisor that, hey, you know what? Give me the opportunity to grow the paper route, as other paper boys would quit because obviously they're 11-year-olds, between 11 to 15-year-old kids. A lot of the times they don't wake up. There's no discipline for waking up, and customers get really upset that their newspaper wasn't delivered 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, because it has to be delivered first thing in the morning. So I would market myself by telling them that, hey, listen, I got a good track record. Let me expand the business more, and I'm growing the business by soliciting new people to subscribe to the newspaper. So that's what happened. I started growing different paper routes, and that's why I needed to hire other little paper boys, to help me deliver the newspaper. So that's where I learned about growth or scaling a business. I learned that also very young, that I could easily obtain different territories. But that didn't last long, because obviously as a 11-year-old, there are certain things that you don't account for. And I look at it now and I laugh. It's innovation. My other neighbor, whose sister had a driver's license and they were in a vehicle, outperformed me, delivering newspapers on a bike. So eventually the bike kind of came obsolete, and they ended up going with paper boys, or, in this case, his sister had a car, so they could deliver newspapers at a bigger scale. So, look at it, not necessarily technology, but something, innovation, something innovative, put me out of business, you can say.
How did you motivate other kids as an 11-year-old to work for you?
So I kind of already knew, again, going to what I was already seeing through print media, the things that were out there. I would use those things to entice people to do things. Obviously, during my era, the Walkman, the cassette player, was around. The Sony Discman had just come around as well. So we would find cassettes, and we would trade them amongst each other. I would tell them, listen, you know what, I'll record a cassette for you, or I'll figure out who was your favorite rap group at the time, and I would buy those things, we're at the swap meet, and say, look, I'll give you a Run DMC cassette, help me out, or let's go to 7-Eleven, pick up the latest copy of Thrasher magazine, because we were skateboarders, or I had old skateboards. I would change out the parts, give them a skateboard, kind of like an Indian trader. So you're young, there isn't really, we're not talking big dollars. So it was just enough to get us by, to find something new to do, and that's how I did it. I was able to leverage those things that I had, and because I was a little bit ahead of them, I kind of knew how to leverage certain situations. And that's how I did it. That's how I was able to scale the business, like I said, to a certain degree. And it wasn't until, it was only a matter of time, as an 11-year-old or, 12-year-old, that you're going to do things like fall asleep, which I did. A couple of times a district manager had to come and knock on my door, like, hey, dude, you got to wake up. We got to get you, people are waiting for the newspaper. And that's when, the district manager decided, let's start going with people that have cars now to deliver the newspaper, because other 6th graders, 7th and 8th graders were seeing what I was doing. Now they were trying to take me out, because I'm the one styling now. Got a little bit of money in my pocket, and I'm happy as can be, and they want part of it. So just like in business today, somebody that's out there is going to see what you're doing, and they're going to want to try to either mimic what you're doing, compete with you, or even try to put you out of business. And so that's why I resonate today with business, with that particular experience that I had as a youngster, which I haven't shared with many people.
As an 11-year-old, you're obviously doing things for the first time. So you're testing things out and seeing how things respond. It seems like you were kind of living by a principle. Now that you're looking back to when you first realized you're an entrepreneur, what kind of principle were you living by?
It's the principle of structure. I didn't have structure from the get-go. Like you said, I had to test different things. Maybe I wasn't waking up an hour early. I was waking 15 minutes till. The newspaper would come to the front door, and then they would knock. They would knock hard, letting you know that the newspaper was there. So sometimes, I would either wake up at the knock, I was still asleep, and I was doing things, halfway the way they should be done, or I had the option of waking up early being ready and executing quicker, faster, and getting out to my paper route. So I did experiment with certain things, and I failed at first, but then once I understood structure and what structure meant, that's when I executed, even as an 11-year-old, at a high level of execution with success, of course. Because I did have a client that if he didn't have his newspaper by 5:30 on the porch, he was waiting for you outside the street, and he wanted the paper in his hand. So for me, that was very intimidating. That was something that I had to do very quickly and get out there before he comes outside, because I didn't want to talk to this guy, because he was a, retired military. Now that I know what I know, could have been a Navy SEAL for all I know. But it was very intimidating having, this guy waiting for his newspaper religiously. Again, this is an individual that was structured. He was expecting his newspaper at a certain time. So I knew that I had to, also make sure that I commit to my job so that he can have his newspaper in a timely manner early in the morning. So I live by that principle. Today, structure. It's 100%, it's going to be structure.
I really want to go back to that moment when you were confronted because you had to make a change to be more efficient, correct?
Yes, I did.
Could you kind of walk me through that moment?
So what ended up happening, like I said, I had my challenges. Obviously, as the business scaled, there's more volume involved. For those that remember or still pick up a Sunday paper, Sunday newspaper's fat and thick. Okay, so you can only carry so many of those newspapers on your bike. Okay, so as the newspaper route grew bigger, you had to be more efficient. That means more trips, because you had to come back for newspapers that were heavier, and you're pedaling on the bike. And like I mentioned before, now I'm competing with my neighbor kid who has a sister that has a El Camino. So he's in the back of the El Camino throwing out newspapers like there's no tomorrow. So I'm getting taken out by the innovation of the fact that he has a car, and I'm younger, and I still have a bike. I don't even have a driver's permit at the time. So those were the things that confronted me, in addition to, I probably could have made some adjustments, maybe got some help from my parents or some other kids that were, older to drive, but I didn't do that. So those inefficiencies ended up costing me the paper route, because I was, not efficient. I was getting there later. And in one case, I remember the camel that broke the last straw that broke the camel's back was I threw a newspaper and it landed up in the roof. Paper exploded everywhere. So, when the district manager confronted me if I delivered the paper, I said, yeah, I did deliver the paper. He goes, where'd you deliver it? I told him I delivered the porch, and then it was up in the roof. So it was, by the time we got there, and I was confronted by him and the homeowner, the newspaper was flying everywhere. I think it was hilarious. That was it. That's when the paper route career pretty much ended, because I had outperformed myself in terms of growth, but I didn't scale it in a way where I can actually perform. So it's very important that you scale a business so that you can perform. If not, the customers are going to get pissed.